Hello and welcome back to the RPA Developer Training. In this demo, we'll continue our lesson on UI Explorer by focusing on the Property Explorer panel. We'll also provide an example of how it can help us create more advanced UI automation. Let's begin. A part of UI Explorer that's often overlooked is the Property Explorer panel. It displays all of the attributes that a specified UI object can have, including the ones that do not appear in the selector. To see how it works, let's go to the RPA Challenge website and indicate a UI element. We'll select the phone number label. After making the selection, we can see that all of the available attributes of the element are listed in the Property Explorer panel. The panel on the right side of the screen only displays the attributes for the selected node, but the Property Explorer panel shows all of the possible attributes corresponding to the UI elements that we've indicated, including inner HTML, inner text, the position, role, and so on. Access to these attributes can prove very useful in situations where we want to fine-tune a selector or base UI synchronization on attribute values. Let's consider the latter. In UiPath Studio, there are multiple activities that use UI element attributes. For example, the getAttribute activity retrieves the value of a specific attribute. We can use the value to build the subsequent workflow logic. When working with web applications, we can also set the value of an attribute by using the setWebAttribute activity. This can be useful in cases such as attended automation. For example, we can use the setWebAttribute activity to disable a submit button or change the text that it displays. This can help guide the users throughout their interaction with the automation. Next, let's see how we can use the information provided by the Property Explorer panel in a process. On the RPA Challenge website, we can see that we have a Start button. If we press this button, its label changes to Round 1. Let's consider the following situation. We want to enter different sets of data into this form, depending on the value of the button label. If the label is Start, we use a certain file as input. If the value is different, then we use another file. Okay, let's get started. First, let's see the structure of the selector. It has a tag with the value button, and it is stable as it is. In the Property Explorer panel, we can see the Active Accessibility Name, or AA Name, property, which contains the button label shown in the interface. We'll need to get the value of this attribute at runtime to proceed on a certain branch. Let's return to Studio, add an Element Exists activity, and indicate the button. This activity searches for the element until it identifies it, or the timeout expires. Then it returns a Boolean result. We'll create a Boolean variable for the Exists property by pressing Ctrl+K. Next, let's drag and drop an if activity. If our button exists, we check the value of the attribute. Otherwise, on the else branch, we log the message button not found at warn level. Back to the then branch, let's drag and drop a getAttribute activity and indicate the element. The attribute that we want to get the value for is AA Name. We'll create a variable that will hold the value of the attribute. Then we'll drag and drop another if activity inside the then branch. If the attribute value is Start, we'll log the message attribute value is Start. If not, we'll log the attribute value. The subsequent automation steps are not relevant for the purpose of this demo, so we'll stick to only logging the results. OK, now we want to run the workflow while the button label is Start. For the button text to change, we need to refresh the page. It worked. In the output panel, we can see that the button was identified and the attribute value is Start. Let's run the workflow again with the button label different from Start. Let's check the logs. Attribute value is round 1. Great! But what happens if the button is not on the screen? Well, let's close the browser and run again. After the element exists activity has timed out, we see that the execution has stopped and the log we have in the output panel is button not found. There isn't any exception thrown because element exists returns a boolean. If you want an exception to be thrown when the button is not found, you can use the find element activity instead of element exists. This approach is useful in automation scenarios where we need to check the states of certain UI elements or retrieve information about them. With this, we conclude our demo on working with UI element attributes and the Property Explorer panel. For a quick recap, the Property Explorer panel displays all of the attributes that a specified UI object can have, including the ones that do not appear in the selector. This information can be very useful when fine-tuning selectors or building UI synchronization. Activities like getAttribute and setWebAttribute can be used to develop process logic based on UI element attributes. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Until then, happy automation!